Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Claire Rosacco and I'm a past president of the club and delighted to be able to introduce somebody who is to me one of my idols. When they asked if I would introduce Joanne, I said to my husband, you know, that's like a check off on the bucket list, for God's sakes. That's just huge. She is just a really fantastic leader, and I'm so glad she could be with us today. I said we've had really some amazing speakers at the City Club, but I'll share a secret with you. She will be one of our best when you hear her. She is truly a servant leader. She's always willing to help others. She's had just some amazing experiences through her life, and she shares those experiences, which is really a treasure. She told me I had to keep it brief because I actually did research on her, so I'm going to skip a few things, but there's just so much you could say. She served with distinction for over 20 years in the Ohio General Assembly, where she was named Ohio Legislature of the Year in 1991. She served as the first woman Speaker of the House from 1995 to 2000. She was also chairwoman of the 2008 Republican National Convention, and just, I believe yesterday, was announced that she will be the new co-chair for the Committee on Arrangements for the 2016 Republican National Convention. How cool is that? Timing is everything. Governor Kasich appointed Joanne as the first chairperson of the Ohio Casino Control Commission, where she has shepherded all the rules, regulations, and oversight and staff necessary to ensure that the 4 Ohio casinos operate above board. What does that tell you about real integrity and credibility? When she realized how difficult it was to recruit quality women candidates for the Republican Party, she established the Ann Davidson Leadership Institute. The mission of the Institute, created in 2000, is to increase the number of competent women, Republican women in public and community service and party leadership by providing training and support. That's vision and that's leadership. At a ceremony in December 2013, when her portrait was hung in the Women's Gallery of the State House atrium, she was honored by Governor Kasich, Governor Taft, Governor Voinovich, who, as you know, went on to be a U.S. Senator. And Senator Voinovich said this: "History will record that no woman in Ohio history has accomplished what Joanne Davidson has. She is a member of the Republican Legislators Association. She's in the Women Ohio's Hall of Fame in Ohio. She's a YWCA Women of Achievement winner. I could go on, but she won't let me. It's time to give a warm City Club welcome to Joanne Davidson."
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Claire, and I do appreciate that. I should have told you to cut it way back on that introduction, but some of those things that you just remind me of are a long time in the past. I must admit, as I was driving up here this morning, preparing to speak to the City Club, I thought, this will be a little bit more comfortable than it was when I spoke to you when I was Speaker. And hopefully the questions will be a little easier to respond to than they would be then. But I appreciate having a number of friends that are in the audience today and look forward to sharing, probably telling you more than you ever wanted to know about a political party convention. But I also want to acknowledge, in talking about my efforts in the Ohio legislature, that when I had an opportunity to serve as Speaker, my minority leader, Representative Pat Sweeney, is here today too. So we kind of went into new experiences together, Pat, and thank you for all your efforts. And I'm sorry that I probably couldn't do some of the things that you wanted me to do. But let me just say this about Pat Sweeney. You know, when the efforts are tough to make, and when they're really important to his home community of Cleveland, you could always count on Pat Sweeney, regardless of how controversial they were, to be supportive of that. And Pat, I well remember that, and thank you so much. And I want to thank also, thank you. I really want to thank the City Club for the invitation to be with you today and perhaps kind of share with you the process by which we've gotten to where we are today and what you can look forward to in the future. Last week, at the end of the week, we were, and Terry Egger was with us there. He's gotten to be a attender at the meetings of the Republican National Committee. We met in San Diego. When we left Ohio, it was 2 degrees. When we arrived there, it was 70. I wonder sometimes about sticking in Ohio with our weather. But 2 important announcements were made when we were there. One were the dates of the convention, which had not been confirmed until then, which will be from July the 18th to the 21st in 2016. The other one was one that probably hasn't received much publicity, and that's that the first presidential debate for Republican contenders will be held in Ohio in August of this year. So when we think about 2016 and the convention to nominate someone being a long way off, actually, there's just a few months between now and when Ohio will kick off the debate schedule. So I think that's kind of exciting on top of obviously having the convention here. I just want to go back just for a few minutes to share with you the experiences from 2006. The city of Cleveland put a formal invitation and bid in for the 2008 Republican National Convention. It was one of the 4 cities, actually, that we visited in 2006. And I remember that very well because we were in Tampa, Florida, visiting Tampa that had also been on the convention. And the Cavaliers sent their plane down to pick up the site selection committee to fly us back. Now, you should have seen the discussion when we were getting on the plane about who got to sit in LeBron James' seat. Okay? So, you know, I was chairman of the site selection committee that year, so I said, okay, we'll take turns. So each of us had a little bit of time to sit in LeBron James' seat, back flying up to Cleveland, and when we were greeted at the airport with a great welcome, and then went down to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for a great reception, and everybody was excited about Cleveland. I think that we loved the arena. We loved the Q Arena. We had presentations over there. It's a great arena. We were impressed by the host committee. Some very important people had stepped forward to do that. We looked at the transportation system and the management of the transportation system in Cleveland. It's one of the best that we'd ever seen. So then why didn't we select Cleveland to do the 2008? If I said all these complimentary things, well, there were a few things that just weren't going to be workable for us at that time in 2006. I shared them, obviously, with Dave Gilbert when we first started, probably 2 years ago. I was up here, and Rob Frost was walking me down at snowy streets to actually sit down with a group of people from Cleveland to say, what can we do to put a bid in that may solve these problems? They were, how do you take care of 15,000 members of the media? You know, there were other issues there where there were adequate hotel rooms. And so we were able to share with those people discussing doing a bid at that particular time. If you're going to do this, you have to address those factors. They're very, very important. And you have to really address something that people don't think about, and that's the experience of a delegate and alternate. People come to the conventions, they pay their own way. The political parties generally do not pay the expenses. They come here because they want to come here, and what our responsibility is, not only to get our business done, but to ensure that the city has a chance to show itself off, but that they have a chance, obviously, to have an enjoyable time. So I think that today, as we talk about what happened as we went through the bid, culminated in the signing of the contract in Chicago in September. It started out really with the site selection committee coming up here. And I knew most of the members of the committee, not all of them. So I decided I would call each one of them before they came to Cleveland, put a good word in for Cleveland. And I can't tell you how many of the members of those site selection committees said, I've never been to Cleveland before. So they really didn't know what to expect. But as you know, back through the years, the negative things always stay in their minds much more than the positive things about a community. So after they came up, it was really kind of interesting because they were just blown away by Cleveland. And that's the language that they used in emailing me back or calling me back, that terminology, we were blown away. Because Cleveland had changed in those years from 2006 until they came for their site selection visit for this go-round. Lots of changes, easily identified public improvements, new hotels under construction, a new convention center, and excitement in the city, which was renewed even before LeBron James said he was going back to Cleveland. Now, I want you to know that I had a bet with my daughter, and she said, in fact, she's never paid off in that bet. I'll have to ask her about that. She said he'll never come back to Cleveland, and I bet her that he would, because I think his heart was in Cleveland, and I think he made that decision. So it's kind of exciting in the same week, the announcement that you're going to get the convention, the announcement that LeBron James was coming back. But actually, I know that there are many people in this room today, Republicans and Democrats, who made major contributions to those improvements being made in this city. And that's extremely important because it takes that kind of working together to do that. And I think that has helped it tremendously to regain its reputation as an outstanding urban city. And I understand from the 2 weeks after Cleveland was mentioned and actually agreed upon for the convention, there were 7,000 positive articles around the world about Cleveland, Ohio. And I believe that compares to about 7 times as many as there had been before. You can't pay for that kind of publicity. It's just impossible to do that. And I think that basically tells us kind of what are the factors that are helpful here in doing this convention. David Gilbert also has told me that he has had dozens of new inquiries about holding conventions in Cleveland since it's been announced that this big convention will be held here. But a political convention is different than any other convention. Sometimes that's hard for people to realize, because a political convention, the decision to come here, and perhaps it is with other organizations too, I know you all think it's a political decision, but it really starts out being a business decision. You have to consider whether or not they can accommodate the number of people you're going to have, whether they have the wherewithal to manage it. They have to discuss all of these kind of things enter into that. Now, are there a little politics in it from the members of the site selection committee? It used to be a little bit more, because we now have a rule that if there's anyone in your state applying to host the convention, you can't be on the committee. So we try to keep a little bit of that politics out of there, but some of it creeps in, as you probably know. But I think that one of the things, and let me share with you, because actually I wrote them down and put them on the desk after the decision was made, in conversations with the Cleveland folks, in conversation with, obviously, the site selection committee. What made the difference in deciding? Well, there were a lot of positive things that made a difference. Obviously, they were very, very impressed by Mayor Jackson. Mayor Jackson would meet them at the airport when they were arriving. He would stay with them and attend all of the meetings while they were here, and he would wave them goodbye when they were leaving. That doesn't always happen when you go in cities like that, to have a mayor that is that dedicated and that focused. Governor John Kasich. Some governors would just as well not have a convention in their state. It takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money. Governor Kasich supported this from the word go, whether or not it was going to be in Cleveland, in Columbus, or in Cincinnati, and all 3 cities bid. And so he was very much in front. And as many of you know, Jobs Ohio, which is the independent development effort in Ohio, is one of the major contributors, and made it clear going in that whatever city might get this, and it would be true for the Democrat convention too, should it go to Columbus, they would be the leading financial contributor to that. That means a lot to site selection people when you put those facts on the table for them to do that. You actually had excellent people that stepped up to take the leadership from the business community, and it's very important to be able to do that. And I think that you were actually lined up some very great people that are participating in that. And while they think about all of these things, you know what it really comes down to? It comes down to whether or not they believe, the people that have stepped forward to put the bid in, the people that are going to be supportive of it, obviously some of the leading citizens in this city, and you've got 3 who are particularly careful, good friends of mine. Senator Voinovich, who's already been mentioned, obviously Rob Frost, our Cuyahoga County Chairman, who is with us today, and Bob Bennett. Bob, unfortunately, as you know, passed away very recently. His hope and dream for many, many years was to be able to host a Republican National Convention in Cleveland, Ohio. And I know that he encouraged me to take a role, one of the reasons that I accepted the responsibility of co-chair. And when I was with Bob's family at the funeral, I assured them, I thanked them first of all for all of the time that they gave to Bob to be active in the party. And I assured them that the host committee, citizens of Cleveland, and the Ohio Republican Party would do it right. So that's the commitment that we have, to do it right. Now, let me talk about what to expect, because I think that's my title here. And this is going to be a mixed up bunch of things, okay? There's no order to them. You can make your own decision of which of them you think are positive and which of them you think are problematic. So starting out, obviously, with those that I think are the ones that you already know about. People don't know much about Cleveland, Ohio. If you can bring an 11-member site selection committee of members of the Republican National Committee throughout the country, and at least half of them have never been here before, it gives you an indication. And if they haven't been here, they don't appreciate what a great city it is. This puts you on the map, not only across this country, but internationally it puts you on the map. Because this is for the nomination of one of the candidates' team for President and Vice President of the United States. And believe me, every foreign country I know is uniquely interested in what is happening in our presidential election because it affects them in one way or the other. And I've already mentioned the 7,000 obviously positive articles. The economic impact is one that is harder to put a finger on because you get some direct economic impact. Obviously, that comes from the occupation of hotel rooms, from the restaurants business, from transportation companies, from vendors who help put on events, from florists, and you can continue that. You know, even some limited number of construction jobs. Doesn't always reach everyone who would like to be involved in it, but it reaches a good many of people. And those things you can kind of put a value on. And probably if you looked at the direct economic benefit, it's probably about 200 million. I think those are the numbers that we got from Tampa. Those are numbers that have been used in others. But then there's the indirect benefit of that. It's the multiplier of that 200 million that basically says you probably have an estimate of about 400 million that will come to benefit the city on an economic basis. The Committee on Arrangements, which is, the chairs have been named, but the members have not been named yet. They will be within the next probably week or 10 days. Will, believe it or not, set up shop here in Cleveland, probably by the 1st of March. I know that we're working with, I see Joe Roman over here is doing some of the logistics things on this, that we're already looking at office space in which the Committee on Arrangements can occupy. We'll start out with a small group of people, 10, 12, 15. By the time we get to about 6 weeks before the convention, we'll have many more here. And some of them were here, I've kidded them, some of them are here probably long enough to register to vote. I just thought I'd share that. Actually, in Minnesota, when we were there, they do caucuses, as you know. They don't do the primaries as we do, they do caucuses. And so actually some of our staff had been there long enough to qualify, and they wanted to go to the caucuses. So they didn't want to feel that they were out of it because they were not in their home state. So they actually participated in that, and I would anticipate some of them might do that. If after you've put together the staff for the Committee on Arrangements, then the host committee will have a staff that'll probably be somewhat, Terry and I know Joe and others have been talking about it, somewhat smaller group of people for the host committee. And I don't know whether we'll co-locate or not. There's some discussion on that. You used to not be able to do that because the Committee on Arrangements was funded with federal dollars for both the Democrat and the Republican Party. Congress has discontinued that funding, so now there's an additional responsibility not only on the host committee, but also on both parties to raise some additional funds to be sure that everything is covered in that situation. After the primaries, if there is a clear winner, at least in our party, who's been identified as a nominee who's lined up enough of the delegate votes, committed, you know, vis-a-vis the primaries, they will then also move staff in the kind of joint location that everybody's operating at, because then that candidate gets an opportunity to make certain decisions about the programming of the convention, the podium, other types of things that kind of are designed for their benefit and actually for their comfort. You're going to have your museums and your parks and your other areas that are going to have increased visiting. I even suspect that Cedar Point will get some benefit from it, and I think probably, I know Ann Benjamin is here, out in Portage County, some of the places there everybody will get a benefit from this by additional people that are coming in for that. If you want to have some fun, you can kind of go online and see how many people have listed their houses or their apartments or their condos for rent, either weeks before the convention or certainly in the week of the convention. And there will be a lot of people, frankly, who will be takers on that because they don't necessarily want to live out of a hotel room for a period of a couple of weeks. And so they'll be looking, and they want someplace perhaps that they can entertain. So if you haven't thought about that possibility, there are a lot of other people who already have. So let's just take a look at the raw numbers of what we're talking about. Probably about 50,000 people will be in and around Cleveland for the convention. That will include 15,000 members of the media. Now, somebody said you can't mean 15,000, maybe 1,500? No, I mean 15,000. And that was one of the issues that's still being ironed out about where we house the media, because the media wants and needs immediate access to the arena to know what's going on, so they can then go back to their media space and obviously file their stories and do other things. There's a couple of really good options, and I know that the right decisions will be made between the committee and the host committee to do that. They'll also, in addition to those 50,000 visitors, probably need about 3,500 to 5,000 volunteers. I know many of you have already talked to me about never been to a convention before, never had a convention in my home state, really like to volunteer. Well, you can either go on the Ohio Republican Party site or you can go on the host committee site right now and indicate that you're interested in volunteering at the convention. And there are all sorts of things that volunteers will do. As far as helping with the transportation system, we try to put host groups out in every hotel that actually where delegations are staying, to welcome them to Cleveland, to help them to understand all the things that they can do when they're in Cleveland, to give them directions, to hold their hands if they've forgotten something from home. So every hotel will have a small welcoming group that will be staffed by volunteers. So if you're interested, go on now. There will be an official application to volunteer that will be developed by the Committee on Arrangements. And at the time that that is done, anybody who's already signed up will be sure that they get emailed to them a copy of that official application. Understanding that if you volunteer, you will need to spend 1 day in training prior to the beginning of the convention, because we like to have well-trained volunteers who speak well about the city and actually are good ambassadors for us. Lots of fun, lots of challenging things that you can do. And actually we have after everybody else goes home, we have a big party for the volunteers and thank them for all the efforts that they've had in doing that. And the economic development of Cleveland won't just be for those 4 days. Delegates will start arriving probably mostly on the Saturday before the convention starts. And they will, I think because of where we are centrally located in Cleveland, Ohio, there will be many more people that will probably drive than usually. If you're sitting down in Tampa, Florida, it's not quite so easy. But here, what do we market in Ohio? We market our location for economic development. So you're going to have a lot of people that are traveling in. They'll come early, and many of them will stay late. This is part of the vacation for many of these folks. So it won't just be 4 days, 4 nights. It will be an extended period of time, and there are going to be lots of marketing opportunities for people to actually take advantage of that. I know that one of the things that you always worry about is, how much is this going to ruin my drive to work every morning, right? I told you there are good parts and there are bad parts of this. Well, let me assure you that at that hour in the morning, I don't think the delegates are going to be moving around in their buses, all right? I think they're going to be snugly in their hotels having their breakfast meetings. But probably you start to move the delegates from their hotels to the arena, probably about 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which means maybe a little trouble on that going home traffic. And you may have to time yourself a little bit different for that. The buses follow a route. Once you've identified the route, you'll know how to keep away from them. And that route is planned as how they circle around to each hotel and pick up the delegates. And then when they return the delegates, it'll be 11 o'clock at night or 12 o'clock at night or 1 o'clock in the morning, so I don't think they're going to bother your driving at that particular time. But there will be certainly some impact on that. But they'll do their very best to plan the routes that are the least intrusive, obviously, in the major traffic situations. And I think that they can work around that. There will be some designated areas for protesters. I've never seen a convention, no matter how well run it is, or no matter how people are happy with everything that's going on in our country, and that never happens. So there will be protesters, but they will be designated areas for those protesters, and they will be in areas where they will be able to be well seen, but they will be protected in that situation. And some of them will be protesting something that's happening with the convention, and some of them will just be protesting what they don't like about the world. And they have a perfect right to do it. And, and certainly a political convention is an obvious place that they want to express that opinion, but we also have responsibility for their safety. And so that having these areas in which you ask them to gather there or being aware if they're doing a march helps us to be able to provide that protection. I think the other thing that will come up that people will want to know about is security. It's interesting because both conventions are likely to be designated as a special event by the United States Secret Service. When they do that, they take over the security. The host committee doesn't manage it. The Committee on Arrangements doesn't manage it. They will be in here probably as early as March. They've already, I think, designated the agent for it. And that they will come in and they will meet with all the law enforcement agencies around Cleveland and all the suburban communities in Cleveland. And they will work out a plan to work together. And everybody will be involved. One of the advantages of that is usually when you do that, there's additional equipment that has to be brought in. There's additional supplies, there are additional changes, or there are changes to the communications system, and all of those improvements will stay in Cleveland, Ohio, and the other law enforcement agencies when the convention is completed. So law enforcement agencies actually get excited about doing this. For them, it's a little different kind of a challenge. There are a lot of VIPs that will be coming in and out. But they also determine then what is called the secure zone around the arena. And so they will decide where that secure zone will be, and then the ingress and egress in and out of that zone will be restricted under their guidelines. They are good folks, and they do a good job. You just don't want to argue with them. Tried that, didn't work. But I have deep respect for them, and I think that should be a real to give you some security, knowing that will be happening as far as that is concerned. And really, when it's hard to describe. When I said that a political convention is different than other conventions, it's hard to describe, but it is different. It is different because there's one purpose that has to be accomplished, and you can't let anything get in the way of that, and that's nominating your presidential and your vice presidential candidates. That's the major purpose of actually both national political parties. And so much time will be taken with that. And so you will have an opportunity at prime time to see some of this. There may be some opportunities, in other words, where we can give you an opportunity to see some of it that won't be on prime time, so that everybody will have an opportunity. But as you begin to anticipate this, I hope that you will look ahead to it with excitement, because it's a chance to firsthand see the American system of democracy work. Thank you very much.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we're enjoying a Friday forum featuring Ann Davidson, Chairwoman of the 2008 Republican National Convention and the new co-chair for the Committee on Arrangements for the 2016 National Republican Convention that will be in Cleveland. We'll return to our speaker momentarily for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We encourage you to formulate questions for our speaker now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. We welcome all of you here and those joining us via 90.3 WCPN, WVIZ PBS, 104.9 WCLV Idea Stream, or one of the many radio stations across the region and country that carry our City Club programs. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. Next Friday, January 30th, the City Club will host a panel discussion on cancer care in Northeast Ohio with members of the Case Comprehensive Cancer Center. For more information about our upcoming and past forums, please visit us online at cityclub.org. Our media sponsor for today's program is Inside Business, and we thank you very much for your support. Today's program is the Aaron H. and Ruth S. Zychik Memorial Forum, established with a generous gift from the estate of Aaron and Ruth Zychik. We are so grateful for their support. We welcome guests at tables hosted by Cuyahoga Community College, the Greater Cleveland Partnership, Inside Business, Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, PNC, Porter Wright, the Republican Party of Cuyahoga County, and the University of Akron Bliss Institute. Thank you all very much for your support. Now we'd like to return to our speaker for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding our microphones today are Content Associate Teddy Eisenberg and volunteer Deborah Hegler. Could we have Joanne back to the podium and our first question, please?
Yes, Mrs. Davidson, thank you for making that trip to Cleveland. We appreciate it and your message. My question is, what can those of us in neighboring counties, such as Lorain County, expect from the convention, and what can we do to increase our opportunities to make an impact?
Thank you for the question. I think the best thing you can do is think of all of the things in Lorain County that you have that might be interesting to the delegates and the alternates that are here, and do a little bit of marketing on it. There will be obviously lists that will be available. Most of them will be electronic lists in which you can send information, perhaps something that you may have going on at one of your local colleges, some kind of a exhibit that you might have, something that would draw them, even a really good restaurant, something that would draw them into Lorain County. I don't know whether any of the hotels, so I'm not going to venture out onto that one, are located in Lorain County or not. But we'll be happy to work with you. We'll be happy to give you some ideas of how to communicate that. And certainly, we hope that there will be some Lorain County folks who will want to volunteer at the convention too. Thank you.
Ma'am, on the category of security, looking at some preliminary maps, it's clear that both the Justice Center and the Lakeside Courthouse are going to lie within the security zone. And while it's one thing to credential the courthouse employees, we've got lawyers, litigants, witnesses coming and going all day. At St. Paul, were there any of the courts within the perimeter, the security perimeter, and if so, how did they deal with that?
I'm not aware that there were any of those buildings, sir, that were within the perimeter, and I'm not going to guess. I never try to second guess the Secret Service on where those lines would be. They will take all of those things in consideration. I mean, their major purpose of putting a security area is that people that are going in and out of the arena, that they want to be sure what is going in and out, because they sweep that space before the convention even starts. And then they want to keep that, what they have done, the security check on. They want to be sure that they're monitoring who's going in and who is going out. So I'm not going to guess where that would be, but if they are by necessity going to have to do that, I don't remember any huge complexes being in the security area, actually in St. Paul. Around the arena there, it was set a little bit on a separate piece of ground, very similar to what they have here in the queues. So we will hope that that wouldn't, but obviously they will have to take that in consideration, and understanding that it is, at least for 4 days, it would be a problem, but they will probably, if they do have to do that, they will work with the appropriate people to be sure it can be worked out to the best of their ability to do so. And it's unclear yet whether the convention will have 2 sessions on Monday. We used to have 2 sessions on Monday. Let's see, the last 2 conventions have been interrupted by, storms in Florida and Texas when the delegates couldn't get here. Obviously, and in Tampa, it was the fear of what was going to happen. So some of those sessions were canceled. But usually there's 2 sessions on Monday, and then a session in the afternoon, a session in the evening, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they're just evening sessions. So it's not like they're going to be moving these delegates back and forth a lot of times. One of the things I didn't mention, and let me just stick it in here, is that in addition to the Republican National Convention, you will have 56 mini conventions. Why is 56? You're saying there's only 50 states. How can you have it? Because we give delegates to territories. And so Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, and they all each have their own kind of little convention wherever they are staying, and which means that they're going to have a breakfast every morning with a speaker. They're going to look for places, venues that they can take their folks for brunches and lunches and receptions, and every place will be busy to that extent. So we've got that complication on top of the bigger complication of the convention, but it's a wonderful time, and they will just you will help them, I know, because you're proud of Cleveland. You will help them to have a good time. Yes, questions?
Hi, I'm a student at the Bliss Institute at University of Akron. Thank you for speaking to us today. My question is, if the Democrats end up choosing Columbus as their headquarters for the convention, how would that affect the planning here in Cleveland?
I don't know that it would have, thank you for the question, and I'm glad there's some students here. And you need to think about volunteering for be pages or something at the convention, okay? I don't think it would have a major impact. It would be, part of it is whether they would go before we do, and I think that's very difficult for them to do because you've got the 4th of July week in there, and there's a tight kind of space in when they can go, also because you have to avoid the Summer Olympics. So it's a complicated kind of a schedule, but I do not see that it would do that other than, and for the host committee, I'm sure they're already thinking about that, it might affect their fundraising. Might make it a little more difficult for Cleveland, who's done very well so far, obviously, in ensuring the Republican National Committee that they can raise the funds and are well on their way to doing that. But obviously, if people have 2 cities that are coming to them, it might make it a little bit more difficult. But as far as operational, I'm trying to think. I'm sure that the Secret Service wouldn't be happy to do it, but that happened actually in Minneapolis and St. Paul. The Democrats were in Denver. They shut down on a Friday, and we opened up on a Sunday. And so it's workable. Now that was obviously more distance apart, but other than that, that would be the only kind of impact I believe it could have. Maybe Terry or Rob or someone have other thoughts on that you could talk to them afterwards, or obviously, or Joe might have some other thoughts on that. Maybe you've thought about it. And that announcement should come week after next, I believe, so we'll have an idea of whether that's going to be a problem or not. Thank you. But I'm serious about students. I'm meeting with most of the universities now who are saying, what can we do during the convention? And there will be roles for, and it's just a wonderful way to get a practical education about how our system of democracy works. And so I hope that there will be some activities that involve all of you. Any other questions?
Ms. Davidson, you
Yes.
mentioned in your speech that lots of people were interested in renting houses or apartments or whatever during the convention. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if the arrangements committee or the host committee would do anything to manage that process, set standards or suggested standards, or have a listing of such places.
I don't think that we, and I'm looking at Terry Eggers is saying to me, no, I think that it really is an individual kind of association in which one individual is offering a property to be rented, and they're going to deal with a person who's interested in doing it. And, I think they'd have a right to go in and take a look at it, but I think they will reach their own agreement on how it works. I think it would it would be very difficult for us to do that. It would be a liability. We already have enough liability insurance we have to buy without insuring ourselves of getting sued by some landlord out here. So I think but it's something in the future to think about. Any other questions?
Speaker Davidson, you spoke earlier about the site committee and how they selected Cleveland. I know we had some improvements, but what really nailed it for Cleveland? How did they really come to Cleveland to choose this to be the place that they would come to?
Because the final thing was that they believed that there was a passion in Cleveland to host the convention. They felt from the leaders of the convention, from your four co-chairs, from the host committee to the party people in the state, that everybody felt passionately about it. And it started with your mayor. I mentioned that before. And so it was that made the final, in my opinion, the final decision. Yes, we'd like a few more hotels. And yes, we might like something else. But that passion to them basically said, you need that to have a successful, actually, convention. And the people in Cleveland have it and want it, and they're proud of their city, and we're going to do it there. So congratulations. You transmitted that.
Speaker Davidson, thank you for your leadership, and congratulations on your appointment to be co-chair of the Committee on Arrangements. And my question is specifically that for the audience here. Can you explain a little bit more? You've referred to it a lot, and about the upcoming appointment of the committee. How will that committee be comprised? How large will that be? And how big a staff will they have here in town?
Well, the committee, the rules of the Republican National Committee are that one person from each state is appointed to the Committee on Arrangements and one person from each of the territories. So we would have a 56-member, probably, committee with Steve King, who is the Wisconsin National Committeeman, being the other chairman of it with me in Ohio. So you'll have that size of a committee. And usually they take on some individual responsibilities and divide into a few committees to pick up some of the responsibilities while we are here. The staff will start out with probably start out with about 10 or 12 people because we have obviously lots of responsibilities too. And doing that, by the time we get to depending upon whether the presidential candidate obviously is identified by that time, that they'll bring another staff of 20, 30, 40 people in. And by the time we get there, we'll have a staff probably of about between 35 and 50 on board. And most of those people will be here for a year or longer. So it's hard to believe that it takes that long to get ready for it, but all of the details. The other thing that I did not mention is that it's tradition for the Republican National Committee to hold its summer meeting the year before the convention in the city that is hosting the convention. So I fully expect that the summer meeting of the Republican National Committee will be in Cleveland in August. And that has always been, then you can take them and they can see the arena, and everybody who took part in voting for this can actually come to Cleveland and get a look at what it's like and see the arena and visit some of the venues and those types of things. So you'll have to put up with us, in August too, but there won't be that many of us, a couple hundred. Well, that's drop in the bucket for you all. Yes.
Speaker Davidson, during the run-up to the decision-making, all the political pundits were saying that the decision would be made based on what would be most impactful in the general election. And so people would say, well, Ohio would be chosen because Ohio is such an important, crucial state and to the general election. And therefore, Ohio should be chosen, or some other site for some other similar political reason. You haven't said anything about that. Can you clear up if that's part of the decision on choosing Ohio and Cleveland in particular, or not? And if so, or if not, do you anticipate that this will affect how Ohio votes in the general election?
There is no, let me take the last part of your question first. There is no study that indicates in hosting a convention in your state that it affects what happens at the election. Of the nominees that you've had there, if you go through and study the history of it, you will see that doesn't necessarily relate. I think I did touch on it very briefly. I said that it's generally a business decision, And if you can't make that over the top of the business decision, it doesn't make any difference how politically you might want to do it in the state. You're not going to do it. You also can't choose a state that doesn't put a bid in. And there have been many times in which we've had bids that there's been no bid from Ohio. Now, I think, you know, a number of, not that Ohio hasn't hosted. 1936 was the last convention that was hosted in Cleveland, Ohio, okay? But actually, it takes a big city, a big urban city that's confident in itself and has the hotel rooms and the venues and the arenas to do it. I mean, and actually, I did the site selection the last time that we did it in Minnesota, and I went to New York, obviously, and looked at New York, and I was in Tampa, and I was in Cleveland, and we had one other city that bid. But that bid document, if you've seen it, it's a bid document that takes somebody that really knows what they're doing to put it together. A lot of cities, first, they're not going to tackle it. So you have a limited group of cities that you can actually choose from based upon who's decided to bid. We have never had a situation where 3 Ohio cities have bid at the same time, which tells you something about our urban centers and how they are growing and how their ability to host a convention is now improving to do that. So while there's some people that will argue politics, you cannot, if you spread it out. In fact, if you would look at the rules of the Republican Committee as far as the Site Selection Committee, it basically has a statement in there that the site selected should not be selected for political purposes. Yes. Dick.
With regard to the fundraising,
Yes, sir.
what are the funds used for? What's our goal, and how are we doing?
Well, the host committee is able to organize itself as a 501c3 organization, a charitable organization, which obviously helps a little bit with raising money. I would say that the goal probably is somewhere between 55 and 64 million from the host committee. And those dollars go for, they fund the transportation, they fund the operation of the host committee, they fund much of the operation of the Committee on Arrangements, they provide office space, they provide housing for Committee on Arrangements staff people who come in. There is a build out that takes place in the arena, because if you're going to put a big podium there, you have to take some of the seats out of an arena. The queue is just perfect for this kind of thing, and so there's some significant cost involved with the build out of the arena, the build out with the podium. As far as the program costs, those fall to the Committee on Arrangements, because the decisions on that. But there are significant other costs. They will do, I think probably is on the drawing board, on Saturday before the convention opens, you usually do a welcoming party for the media. You want to keep the members of the media who are here happy with where they are, okay? As we all know, they can help you or they can hurt you. I worried a little bit when they're coming in from Denver that they were all so worn out, but actually they were pretty good. And you will see, while the prime time that they're on is just usually a distinct period of time, an hour, but many of the networks are on a lot more because they'll all have, you know, their trucks here, and they will be on it more than that. So it's the media. You treat them very kindly. But let me just say this: media wants suites, obviously, in the arena. Host committee does not pay for building out those suites. They have to pay for building out their suite. So the media that wants more space are paying for that space. So as much of this is spread out as can. And I think that Cleveland will decide to do a welcoming party for the delegates and alternates on Sunday when they all arrive, which is typical. I'll tell you one of the things that the members of the site selection committee were blown away. There were a lot of things, but one of the things they were blown away with was Playhouse Square. And they talk about that yet. And so I'm sure that Playhouse Square will be involved in some of these activities too. So it's just a lot of things that mount up to a lot more money than you would think. It costs money to raise money too. That's another consideration. I would say right now that the committee is probably more than halfway to its goal. And those are commitments that have been made and dollars that are in the bank. And obviously, they're they will have to file a very strict report, so this will be, they've done a great job, and frankly, that was part of the decision. I mean, it's the first time that the Republican National Committee ever said, if you're serious about bidding on a convention, you've got to be able to have this amount of money that you can guarantee up front. Because we've run into problems in other conventions. I was in San Diego, I think, when there were problems with whether or not the electricity was going to be turned on or not. You don't want to go back and revisit those things, so we're getting a little bit more a financial stability kind of thing, and I think it's a smart thing to do. So I think that they've done an excellent job on that, but I can't say enough about what you have done as community members, what you've come together to do in rebuilding this city. And I know, Dick, that you've been a part of that, and I know many of my other good friends have been a part of that too, and it takes that to actually make that happen, because there's not that long between 2006 and when they visited again, and yet it's just a different city. It's not just a different city in the improvements, it's a city that feels good about itself, and that's the important thing. Mm-hmm.
Congratulations and thank you for all that you've done. This is obviously great stuff, great news for Cleveland. I'm curious, based on your studies of past conventions and other cities' experiences, whether there's anything keeping you up at night at this point?
Well, since I just got named yesterday, not yet. But I can tell you that there will be a lot of things that will keep me up at night. It's just a lot of detail kind of things, and then you're working on a tight timetable, and then everybody wants to be a part of it, and you want to accommodate everybody as best you can to be a part of it, because it is an exciting team. And everybody says to me, well, I've never been to a convention before. We want to make it as possible for as many people to participate, and so you worry about that. But Terry and I have gotten to know each other. Obviously, I've known Joe for a long time. Rob has been a tremendous support and help, and he's a person that doesn't hesitate to pick up the phone and say, are you sure? But those kind of people are just invaluable in making it. And I know I've got another good friend here I have to shout out. So she is my vice chairman of the Casino Control Commission, June Taylor. And let me tell you, if something is happening in Cleveland that she doesn't like, I usually hear about it. So she's been a great friend, and she's worked very hard on this too. And I take my hat off to you, June. Anyone else? Yes.
Hi. Thank you so much for coming. Really exciting that we're going to have the convention here in Cleveland. I'm a numbers gal, so I just want to make sure I have my numbers correct. You said approximately 15,000 just for the media alone.
15,000,
yes,
correct.
That's mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling.
It really is.
Now, a lot of those are not just the media individuals, but their teams that set up all of their equipment, manage them, follow you around carrying the big camera on their shoulder, those kind of things.
Yes, I guess the more the merrier
yeah,
when they're
that's
concerned.
True.
And then the total of the constituents and other folks and their families, because you said that they make this their vacation, some of them. So is it safe to say to expect about 70,000 approximately?
I think I'd probably stick with the 50,000 number.
50? I was hoping for the 70, but I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Well, the other thing that there is an awful lot of international press that will be here too. And they always have what they put together a radio row. Now, radio row is where all the radio stations, you walk down an aisle, it's like you're walking down an aisle, and people who want to be interviewed walk down that aisle a lot. And and that they can pull them out and call them over and say, put a mic in front of them and say, what do you have to say to our listeners? But it's fun. And so that's part of accommodating the media too, is where can you have the radio row, because a lot of people like to do that, a lot of elected officials and others, and then they can give a personal story about how the convention's going. So it's an important part of it.
Speaker Davidson, thank you very much for your many years of public service and all the work you've done to bring the convention here and make it a success. My question has to do with the comment you made about the protest zones and the general security, and it's really two parts. One question is, who actually decides? Is it the RNC or is it the Secret Service that decides where those are located?
The Secret Service will determine that.
And secondly, have you given any thought to maybe educating some of the delegates and attendees about how to interact appropriately? You can see my concern with the protesters, so that we have civil discourse.
Pardon?
Has there been any thought to perhaps talking to the attendees or providing educational information to the delegates and attendees about how to interact with the protesters, so that we have civil discourse over the different issues as opposed to clashes?
Well, many of these people that are delegates and alternates have been people that have been actively involved in their political party in their home communities. As probably many of them elected officials, other people pretty well trained in that. And I think that certainly that's something that every morning when you have a breakfast, if there's been any problems, you try to share at every breakfast. Every delegation has a breakfast. That's the time you get briefed. If there are any problems, you try to share that with them. And I think that, at least in my experience, and I've been to every convention, I don't think I want to say how long ago, except one, in the last number of years, that I've not been at one in which the protesters got out of line. They've been pretty well. There was a little incident in Minnesota, but nothing to the extent that it's turned into riots or anything. I don't want to scare you, but it would be unfair not to basically say there will be protesters. I mean, we all know there are going to be protesters. They are monitored totally, and the delegates and alternates will receive instructions. When we were in Philadelphia, there were a lot of protests then. You walked across streets and you stepped over them. I do not anticipate any problems, but I thank you for that suggestion, because I'm sure that the security people will send us any warnings or anything that they have. They have a right to protest. That's part of what we believe in a democracy, and they have that right. And they have a right to be protected, but so do the delegates and the alternates and the guests that are here have a right to be protected. I have confidence in the Secret Service. You remember that we went to New York in 2004. It was quite an experience, because New York was not getting any conventions then because of 9/11, and everybody was afraid to go to New York City. And we went to New York, and you were probably there, Lisa, were you? And you were too. And it couldn't have been better organized and better managed, and actually put New York back on its feet as far as a convention city to do that. So I know we're about out of time.
Today at the City Club, we've been enjoying a Friday forum featuring Ann Davidson, Chairwoman of the 2008 Republican National Convention, and the new co-chair for the Committee on Arrangements for the 2016 Republican National Convention in Cleveland, Ohio. Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is adjourned.